we're going to begin our session. So I'm really looking forward to our discussions today as we think about our long-term goals for this community. As we're thinking about, and I want you to think about this for yourselves, whether you're building a resource or utilizing some standards, how are we making data discoverable through these efforts? As we were saying at the beginning, this is always a balance of sustainability, long-term sustainability, and innovation. And you'll see icons of either the clock or the light bulb throughout my talk to kind of highlight those components of the work we've been doing. So I run the Human Disease Ontology. We've been running for 22 years. So long-term, definitely long-term. And so I want to share some of the perspectives of doing that kind of work over time. And I think foundational aspects of that work to build our communities, to sustain it, to be reliable to it. And you'll hear that word reliable a number of times throughout the talk. One aspect of being sustainable is making sure that your data is accessible to people. I'm showing you here our homepage. We recently updated it, so I want to show it off a little bit. But having different ways that your community can get to your data, and recognizing that there are different components of how that is done. Some people just love APIs, others sparkle, other people really want to go to GitHub. So finding out how your community is looking at your data, how they're getting to it, and what they need from it, again, is part of sustainability, and thinking of it as not just creating a resource for your particular grant you just got funded for, but how are you going to create a resource for the community? And that's quite a thought shift that you have to go through if you're going to go in that direction, because you make decisions differently if you know your resource is going to be for the larger community and not just for your own purposes. One thing I want to highlight on this slide is the words at the bottom. I'm going to read them. I don't generally ever read words on my slides, but I think it's really important if you're thinking about sustainability. What has been foundational to the work we're doing is providing expertly curated, consistent, reusable, and sustainable characterization of the data we're doing. I think that characterizes all long-term resources. Having a commitment to how you're handling that data, how you're going to shepherd it through time. We began in our earliest days with just lists of diseases, right? And one of our earliest foundational pieces of work that allowed us to be sustainable is we developed a core data model that we still have today. We researched it though over it did take a couple of years, looking at the different areas of disease, how did communities characterize them to come up with a disease etiology-based system, so that we could characterize how diseases were caused and to categorize them and look for similarities and differences across diseases based on this. And this is really from left to right of the slide, starting at foundational sustainable work and then building on it as you went to the right. Adding in cross-references to other clinical vocabularies was the next step forward. So we could do cross-mapping across resources. And then as you go even further, we wanted to look at the semantic information throughout ontology kind of space, but using other ontologies for phenotypes or symptoms or anatomy, so that we could look at diseases that were, say, all located in the lung, or we wanted to find out which diseases had a particular set of 3 phenotypes. That's what the semantic work going to the right of the slide allows you to do, and allows you to have this integration and growth. I think axioms was one of the things that was brought up yesterday. It was a nice introduction to this talk, by the way, in the Bosk talk. But again, it's thinking about how you want to grow the data model incrementally, but sustainably, so that you're not surprising your community that has put time and effort into investing in you. And they don't, I didn't know it was going to do that. Okay. Anyway, time and effort on investing in you so they can count on you to be there in 5 or 10 years. It's not a trivial thing for resources to utilize us when we build a standard or we build another resource. So I think always being well aware of the investment they're making and working with you is always at the forefront of our minds. Now, standardization and data integration are 2 key components of our keeping ourselves sustainable and also moving forward with our community. Nomenclature changes in diseases on a weekly, monthly, and yearly basis. Different diseases have new names that are generated. Knowledge changes. Think of cancers and molecular subtypes of those over the years. That changed quite a bit on how we were describing cancers. So that's something we do with every research community. We add them in. We also map to the older nomenclatures. We define key characteristics for every type of disease. You can imagine metabolic diseases are not classified the same way as diseases of mental health. So each of those areas of disease, communities have determined and they publish on what is the most important key characteristics, and that's what we integrate. And again, we build this semantic framework I showed you on the last slide with those axioms, with those other ontologies, and we continue to build it. So in the last couple of years, like age of onset was one of the areas of work we went through and systematically added that all in where we could define age of onset, we did. Now for data integration, that's how we move forward. We are continually working with our communities, whether in databases or looking through literature, to add in that new information, to keep it up to date. We have provenance on all the data that we bring in. So you can find where the data came from and also research it yourself on our site. So if you look at the disease ontology, that information is trackable over time. And then, as I mentioned earlier, classifications. Communities do go through evolution themselves. And we want to make sure that those new WHO Blue Book classifications for particular areas of cancer, they are mapped to the older nomenclature for cancer. You maybe find that was in NCI thesaurus and is evolving there, but we all have mapped the two across. So data in a particular database is not, the disconnects aren't happening. You always want to keep that continuity. Now on this slide, I really want us to think about how we're assessing impact, and over the age of a resource, it changes. I would say certainly our earliest time I was asked, how are you defining yourself as successful? It was actually, I think, at EBI from Susanna Lewis in the very early days. How do you define it? We define it when we had our first big resource that adopted us without us approaching them. This was Reactome. And we worked with them for 4 months at that time to map all their disease terms. So that for us is success in an early stage. I would say now going through all these years, we've hit all these different ones. And I'm going to go through them briefly because I think they're important to think about. How do you measure success as a resource? How does your role change from being a collector of that data to working programmatically with resources? I was talking to some of the Elixir groups downstairs this morning, even then, about what resources they need and how can you work with them? How can you augment what they're doing or fulfill those needs? So we're very much of the philosophy, see a need, fill a need. That is the DOE's philosophy, I would say, across the board. The earliest days of the disease ontology, it was because there was no ontology that was connecting the ontological data in a systematic way and having all of that nice hierarchy and semantics of an ontology. On some of these other bullet points I wanted to mention, when you think about over time, who is using your resource? Who are the types of users? Because I found if you think about the types of users and then what they're doing with it, how's it being utilized, what kind of studies, it makes you think about how you're going to evolve. What are you going to provide? What are you going to present? And I'll show you some of the tools we've built because of this, but it informs you beyond what you think you need to develop and to what the community thinks you need to be developing. So RNA diseases in the last 5 years have grown quite a lot, RNA-associated diseases. So again, it informs our development. It helps us go in new directions. So we're always kind of keeping that in mind. I didn't want to leave out metrics. I think it's important to think about the metrics of success, but metrics of usage in that way. And I'll go through that a little bit in a couple of slides. And it's, how long have you had funding? What publications have you done? How well are they cited? Are you a member of the Global BioData Coalition? Or do you have a core trusted seal? Those kinds of things. How are you thinking about it yourself? And how are you sharing with that with your community? Where are you putting that on your website? How are you letting your users know you're stable? You're going to continue to be there. You have monthly releases. They can count on you. They can ask you questions and get fairly quick responses. So do you have a tracking system? Those kinds of things I think are really important to think about as a resource because that's manpower, that's responsiveness, and that's your reputation in the community. Like I said earlier, people have to really put a lot of time and effort on their own resources to take you on as a resource. That's certainly a lesson I've learned over the years quite a lot. It has to be thoughtful integration and growth and development because you are being relied on. And so it's much different than if you just have your own resource in your lab for your own use. So it's a different philosophy. So I want to make sure I really strengthened on that and pointed that out. We as a community are building this ecosystem of resources, of this interconnected data. And it's really nice to see in different talks throughout the conference, even in Amos's first keynote, ontologies are being seen and standards are being seen at this point. They weren't 20 years ago seen the same way. It's really nice to see that they are seen as a way for us to connect our data, whether we're building a new resource and want to create a new standard or we want to go out there and see what is the latest one that's out there that we can use. It's a approach that I think the community is now moving towards, which I think is really fruitful. What I'm showing you here is a slide I like to put together to think about the types of data that are interconnected, because all of these resources, these are just examples of these, use the disease ontology, and some of them are collaborators, other ones had never heard of. They just found us, which I think is always wonderful. But again, it's thinking about what are the types of information we can have that's interconnected. So that's really where the standards are moving, and where this is capability of the semantic integration allows you to get to. So I think it's a very powerful approach, and I think it's really nice to say, as a community, we're really have moved in that direction, and I think it's really good for all of us. From this last slide, some of that data was gathered over time, usual manual curation, who's published on us, where do you find it? We've moved forward and some of our innovation into making this automated processes. Wherever we can in our curation pipeline, we've replaced it with automated processes. Like all of our QC is run by Sparkle queries these days, right? In this case, we wrote an R script called Do Utils. It's available freely available in our GitHub. It allows us to programmatically go out and mine all of those publications that cite any of the DOE papers that we've written over time. And what this does is gives us a starting point of data and information that we can then mine and trying to understand better who our community is. And we take it a step further. We look at the geographic location of where all those resources that have been built using the DOE. And to date, we have 445 we've documented. And here on the bottom of the slide, I'm showing you how we break it down by subregions in the world. It gives us new insights and who's using us and where our resources should maybe be deployed, where we should do more outreach, those kinds of things. But it gives us a method that is more feasible, really. I used to spend days and days doing this manual task. Now with this, our team on a quarterly basis looks at them all and then can actually go through and say, what type of uses? What are the new databases? What are the types of research that they're being pulled? And this is all in-house. We keep it as a nice standardized set. We have also put out all these citations, the 2,000 and so for the DOE. Out on our GitHub as one of our reports. So it's something people can mine if they want to. I just want to highlight some of the resources from our last quarterly review of our cited by. In this quarter, we had 110 new citations to go through. Some of these are just a bit surprising, others not, but it's always interesting for me to look at how we're being used, the different types of use cases, because it really starts to show you the possibilities of what could be done with it. I wanted to show you this slide because in this session we talked about we have semantic resources that we're building, and they want to allow semantic integration. I think the Alliance of Genome Resources is a nice example of this. Over the last 20 years, we've worked with each of the model origin databases. We worked with mapping their diseases. We continue to map with them every month. When the Alliance was formed, they had already each of the resources linked through disease. Excuse me. They then had the ability to take their gene, variant, and allele data and map it together through the lens of human disease. And here I'm just showing you the breakdown of counts of organisms and some of the searches you can do. And the one point I really wanted to stress on this slide, it is about relationships, building these things over time, and trust. They had to count on us that we would be there every month when they had new disease terms they wanted to annotate, something came out they needed to change, that we would have this relationship. And I think that's an important part of having a long-term sustained resource, not just the resource, but your community that goes with it, to actually building that connection with them. Here, I just wanted to show you a couple of new things we're doing on the infrastructure side that we've released this year or been evolving. So on the left part of the slide is our Spanish DOE, and we released this just a couple of months ago. Through looking at our global outreach and looking at the communities that are using us, we wanted to start being able to present our data in another language. Oh, sorry, my timer went off. Okay, so they're still going good. Okay. Anyway, sorry. Another language, we wanted to prototype that process. We wanted to make it a rigorous process that we can continue to repeat over time with different languages. So we started with Spanish. It's now freely available, but all the website data and all of the ontology data has been translated. And I'll show you on the next slide a little bit of that detail. The other thing I want to talk about in the innovation is we continue to think of our data model. How are we modeling human disease and what we're looking at to characterize it? And in this, we published a couple of years ago, and it's on our website, with our clinician team, complex diseases, how we would look at them, how we characterize them, which is not the same as we would have done for monogenic diseases, right? So this gives us another area to be able to delve into when we worked on diabetes and asthma for that particular paper, but really looking at how the community's understanding of those diseases, those complex diseases, is changing. And so data modeling changes that build on the stable initial data model is part of our sustainability and innovation. This is just one slide to explain the Spanish translation. We wanted to make sure it was as rigorous as possible. So we used a medical translation company from Texas, and they did all the initial translations. But we did a bit of testing. We did the website data first. We assessed it. Then we did one of the branches of the ontology and assessed it. And then we were happy that we were getting good annotations. We could QC it and we could validate it with Google Translate. Then we did the rest of the ontology. And we follow all that up with manual curation by native Spanish speakers, which we have 2 members of our team that do that. And we even have a cutoff score where we've assessed from those earlier tests where we can say, oh, all of these annotations or mappings up to 75% score are good. We can put all of them in, automatic go, off they go. And then we just review the ones that are a little bit more difficult, because those anything above 75 is actual a shift in wording that we have to check. Below that, any changes, grammar usually. So we did that assessment so we could have a rigorous process. And lastly, just some of the programmatic data mining tools. So again, our community has evolved in how they want to access our data. So we have different tools we now provide. Faceted search is something we developed in-house. You have that semantic disease term, all of its nice annotations are attached to it, and its parents and grandparent terms. The faceted search goes up the tree, pulls those features, and allows you to search that disease based on those inherited features. And so then you can look at connections between disease using that semantics. The other 2, Sparkle, everyone talks about Sparkle. We have a very well-developed Sparkle sandbox. People can play with the data. I actually quite like it when doing annotations. And then the API, we envisioned our API a month or 2 ago, again, to have more programmatic, deep capabilities of grabbing that data. But one thing I want to point out for sustainability, my engineers on our team, we always have this philosophy of when can we use open source and already validated tools. So Swagger is a good example of that. It's used all over. It's been vetted. There's great documentation. So when we're building new tools, we want to make sure we do that. And lastly, the one example is new communities. So clinical communities. I'm at a medical school. We teach medical students. These are clinicians are on my team. We identified a challenge in their educational program is that how you name diseases is not really a deep part of their education. And when you're doing differential diagnosis, when you have 2 diseases that are really named very similarly, it can be quite difficult if you don't have the kind of the background on it. So we devised a new training program. We launched it this last semester, and we'll be continuing it. But this is available on our website. But it's reading what communities need us and developing new resources for it. That's the message of this slide. And then just lastly, we do have a user survey up in 2025, and there are a number of questions. Just have one example here. Again, it's a way of getting to our community in hopefully a slightly different way, getting them to check out what we're doing, give us feedback. Please check out the QR code. I think I see people doing it. Great. Thank you. These slides are also available on our social media. We posted them a couple of days ago. And there's a new YouTube video on our website as well about the Spanish translation. And if you want to ask us questions in interaction, you can join our public Slack channel as well. And these are my team, engineers and analysts on the top and clinicians at the bottom. And thank you for your time.
Emphasizing the importance of ontologies and setting the stage for this session. The next couple of talks are also based on ontologies and knowledge graphs. Since our next speaker, topic 4, is Julia Coblentz, who will talk about the Jordan collection. But while she's getting set up, if there's any question for Lynn, we can.
That's great, Paul. I wonder, so I wonder if these for computational biology, we want to know the organ, tissue type, cell types. Are they something we can maybe incorporate?
Yeah.
PubMed type is a reference knowledge graph.
Yeah, so when I showed you that early slide had all those other types of had anatomy and things on there and cell type. Anatomy and cell types were the first 2 areas of content we added, and we annotated every disease with every bit of knowledge we had on where they are located and what cell type of origin they had. And we used the cell ontology and Ubron to do that. So they're all cross-mapped within the ontology. And you can pull them out, Sparkle queries or our other ways. So it's all there.
NIH has this CDE common data aggregation effort.
Yes.
Even something will help you on this.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. Excellent presentation.
Thank you.
I was wondering how you go about promoting the usage and adoption of Go among, say, experimental, clinical, and translational scientists.
A couple different ways. So we have, I should mention, we have outreach. We bring swag to conferences, and there's some in my chair up here if you'd like some. We do actually intentionally go out and reach out to other new communities. We publish, like everyone else does, social media. We try and link to them as much. And we're also very, very responsive. And I think that we're well known in the community. When they have an area they're interested in, they contact us. And we always are getting back to them right away. So that's one way. We try and reach out as much as we can and to get to new communities. And we diversify our conferences as well that way.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And she'll be around, so you can